Alexander Graham Bell is one of the most recognized of all Canadian scientists, engineers, and inventors. He is credited for inventing many useful inventions that are commonly known all over the world today. Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3, 1847 in Edinburgh, Scotland. He was a very bright and intelligent boy, and was always asking curious questions about the world around him, especially everything and anything having to do with sound. Alexander and his father shared the same name, so Alexander insisted people call him Alec instead, to distinguish himself from his father. Alec's mother went almost completely deaf by the time Alex was just 10 years old, encouraging him to work harder on the inventions that he would later create. Alec created his first invention when he was just 12 years old by helping his best friend Ben Herdeman's father. Ben's father owned a mill, and when Alec asked what he could do to help around the mill, he was told by Ben's father that getting the husks off the wheat was a long and tiresome task that took a lot of effort and wasted a lot of time. To help, Alec came up with a machine that used a series of brushes and paddles to get the husks off the wheat easily and efficiently. In return for Alec's help, Ben's father gave the boys a small workshop that the two boys could experiment and invent in. Throughout his life, Alec enjoyed music. He was very good at playing various instruments even at a very young age. Just by listening to a song, he was able to remember the notes he had heard and play them back. When he was just 16 years old, he started to teach music and speech at the Westonhouse Academy in 1863. He took on many students and taught many people that were older than himself. But Alec studied long and hard what he was teaching, which showed in the way his students excelled. In 1865, the Bells moved to London, England. Alec's father was a well-known speech teacher and inventor who was very interested in sound and the way people speak. During the summer of 1865, Alec spent most of his spare time studying his father's invention called visible speech, which was basically an alphabet made of 34 symbols that represented every way you can make sounds with your mouth. Alec's father thought that it could be used to help deaf people speak. After Alec had memorized all the symbols and what they meant, he and his father would demonstrate it to crowds of people to prove that visible speech worked. Alec would go backstage so that he could not hear what the people in the crowd were saying, and his father would ask people from the crowd to come up with the trickiest words that they could think of. He would then write these words down using visible speech symbols on a piece of paper. Alexander would come from backstage and read the symbols to the crowd to prove that they worked. He never made a mistake, no matter how hard the words were to pronounce. In 1867, tragedy struck the Bell household. Alec's younger brother Edward died from a lung disease called tuberculosis. Just 3 years later, his older brother Melville also died from the same disease. With Alec also starting to become very sick, the Bells decided to move to Canada. They thought the air would be cleaner and fresher compared to the air filled with fumes and factory smoke that constantly covered London. In the summer of 1870, the Bells took a ship to Canada and bought a 10-acre farm in Brantford, Ontario, which bordered the Grand River.
This is the house where the Bell family moved to when they came to Canada from Europe in 1870. On July 26, 1874, Bell came up with the idea for the telephone in his dreaming spot. This house was also where Bell came up with many other ideas and inventions.
Across from the river was the Six Nations Reserve, where Alec talked to the natives and learned the Mohawk tribe language. He translated their language into the visible speech symbols that his father had created. The Mohawks were thrilled with Alec's work, and he was made an honorary chief of the Mohawk tribe. When Alec was 26, he started to take deaf private students, teaching them to speak better. One of these students was named Mabel Hubbard. When she was just 5, she became sick with scarlet fever, which spread to her ears and damaged them. Mabel survived the fever, but was left completely deaf. When she was 15, Mabel started taking speech lessons from Alec, and became a very good lip reader and speaker. Mabel always looked forward to her lessons with Alec, and Alec also enjoyed her company. So it wasn't a surprise to many when they were married on July 11th, 1877. Together they had 4 children. The 2 shown in the picture are Lise and Marion. In 1875, Alec hired an assistant named Thomas Watson, who helped Alec make his drawings and designs become actual objects and inventions. During this time, Alec was continuing to experiment with sound and speech. One of the things he was hoping to accomplish was to invent a telegraph that could transmit more than one message at a time. The telegraph, invented by Samuel Morse, was the fastest way to communicate between long distances. But Alec thought it could be improved and become much more efficient by being able to send more than one message at once. While he was working on this, he had a sudden idea. What if people could be able to talk through the wire instead of using Morse code, which was how telegraph messages were sent? Bell knew that sound could be transmitted through most objects by vibrations, such as a piano string or a piece of metal. He found out that sounds from a human voice could make very thin metal discs vibrate and turn into electrical current. Alec had to attach these thin discs to electrical wires with the discs on either end. He had found a way to send the sound of someone's voice through electrical wires. Just because Alec and Thomas Watson knew how to send the messages was something completely different than getting their idea to actually work. Many different experiments and trials happened before any real progress was made. Almost 2 years later, on March 10, 1876, the 2 men made their biggest breakthrough yet. Alec was in one room with his latest attempt of a transmitter, and Watson was in another room of the house with the latest receiver. Alec accidentally spilled some acid on himself while experimenting, and shouted into his transmitter, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." Watson came running into the room seconds later with great excitement. He had heard Alec's voice through the phone. After Alec and Thomas had done more tests to make sure the telephone worked well at a short distance, he worked on making the distance between the receiver and transmitter farther and farther apart. On August 3rd, 1876, he rented the telegraph lines in between his home in Brantford and Paris, Ontario. These 2 cities were about 13 kilometers apart. The test was a huge success and proved that communications could be made much quicker with his new invention. Even after the success, people were still skeptical about the invention. They wondered if disease could be spread through the phone, or if the people on the other end could even hear them talking. Bell did hours of hard work to get his invention accepted. He gave lectures and demonstrations to hundreds of people, including Queen of England, Queen Victoria. After a hard battle of getting the telephone accepted, people began to realize how valuable it could become. Several other inventors tried to claim that they were the real inventors of the telephone, and Alec had just stolen their ideas. One of these men was named Elisha Gray, who had also been trying to make a similar invention. Alec fought for almost 18 years to get his claim for the invention of the telephone, and a patent for it. One very important person in Alec's life was Helen Keller. Helen was born on June 27, 1880. When she was just 19 months old, she became very sick and was left without the use of her hearing or her sight. She was frustrated at not being able to communicate with people, and often had temper tantrums because of her frustration. When she was 6, she met Alec, and he suggested to her father that she should get a teacher for Helen at the special school for deaf mutes. While at the school, Helen met Ellen Sullivan, who taught her to speak and communicate properly. Helen dedicated her biography to Alec, and told him how thankful she was for his help of making it easier for people like her to communicate with others. Alec didn't only invent the telephone. He was the mastermind behind many other ingenious inventions and ideas that have changed the world that we live in today. Just a few of these inventions include the audiometer, metal detectors, and hydrophiles. He also had many ideas that helped along other inventions and steps in technology. He thought of ideas for flight, found a way to test the depth of water and detect icebergs. He suggested using radium to treat cancer patients, a method which is still used today. The photophone was an invention which Alec said was his greatest achievement. The machine sent sound waves on beams of light so that sound can be sent without wires. The invention only worked in daylight, but it was a huge start to wireless technology. Alec was also very interested in flight. As a boy, he had always dreamed of flying and was constantly experimenting with different kite designs and shapes. Some of these kites were humongous. They were often strange and interesting shapes that took countless hours of time and effort to build. In 1903, the Wright brothers flew the first successful airplane flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Alec was disappointed that he wasn't the first to invent a working flying machine, but still continued to work on his own designs and gliders. Alec died on August 2nd, 1922. During his life, he had been awarded 24 medals and 12 honorary degrees. Alec was grateful for the awards, but had this to say about his life's work. One would think I had never done anything worthwhile but the telephone. That is because it is a money-making invention. It is a pity so many people make money the criterion of success. I wish my experiences had resulted in the enabling of deaf to speak with less difficulty. That would have made me truly happy. He never did anything for attention, money, or for personal gain for himself. It was all for others. This is what drove him and pushed him to work harder at inventions that were giving him a hard time. Bell also said this: "When one door closes, another door opens. But we often look so long and so regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the ones which open for us." Bell never gave up on what he started, a great example of what should be still lived out in people today.